We've seen a very simple way of defining a React component and telling TypeScript that this component is going to receive some argument of child props. But there's kind of a downside to this approach. So in this video, we're going to examine that downside and take a look at another way that we can tell TypeScript about a component that we are creating. Okay, so here's the downside. With the code that we have written, we have told TypeScript, all TypeScript understands right now is that child is going to be a function that receives an argument of type child props and returns some amount of JSX. That is all TypeScript currently understands. Now that might sound like it is the complete story and it totally describes everything that is going on, but it really doesn't quite do so. You see, here's the problem. TypeScript doesn't actually specifically understand that we are defining a React component. You and I, of course, can look at this and say, sure, it looks like a React component to me, but remember, there are other JavaScript libraries out there that also make use of JSX. So there might be some other library that would use some exact value like this. There might be some other JavaScript library that would expect to receive some kind of function that returns some amount of JSX. So TypeScript cannot just directly assume that we are defining specifically a React component. This might be some other kind of component. Now, why is that relevant? Why would we care at all? And does it actually make any difference? Well, yes, it definitely does. Here's a little bit of trivia. Remember, whenever you make use of a React component, or whenever you define one, you can optionally assign a couple of different properties to the React component itself. Properties such as prop types, display name, default props, or context types. These different properties get assigned to the component itself. These are not like props to the component. They are assigned directly to, say, child. So for example, we would write out something like child.displayname is whatever. Right now, TypeScript doesn't know that we are making specifically a React component. So TypeScript is not really going to understand any of these different properties. It doesn't know that our component can have a prop types or default types or display name and so on. As a matter of fact, right now, if we just write out child.displayname by itself and then hover over that, we'll get an error message saying that this is a property that does not exist on this. So that is the shortcoming with this approach right here. It might appear to us that we are giving TypeScript the full story, but we really aren't. We are not directly telling TypeScript that this really truly is a React component that might have all the different properties that are actually associated with a React component. So to fix this, we're going to take a look at a slightly different way of defining a function component with TypeScript. I'm going to write out a second example down here. I'm going to write out export const child as FC. The name right here doesn't make a difference. I'm just applying a different name, so we do not have two components with the exact same name. So you can define or name the second component anything you want to name it. After I put down the name, I'll then put down a colon, react.fc, a set of angle brackets. I'm going to put in child props inside there, and then assign essentially the exact same component. So I'll put in color in a set of curly braces. I'm going to return a div that prints out that color, and you'll notice I no longer have a colon right after that list of arguments right there, or a colon or the child props thing. So this is another way of defining a function component with TypeScript. We can take either approach, but there are a couple of upsides or benefits if you take this style. Let's first examine what really happens with this line of code right here, or what the real difference is. So by taking this approach, we are now telling TypeScript a couple of different things. We are telling TypeScript that this is going to be a React function component specifically. Because we are saying that it might be a React component, that means that we might have some additional properties assigned to it, such as prop types, context types, display name, and so on. We are also telling TypeScript that this component is going to receive a props object of type child props. That's what that set of angle brackets right there is doing. So we get all the benefits of what we had before, but now we can also work with these different properties on the component itself, such as prop types, context types, and so on. If we go back over and write out child as fc dot, now my autocomplete is going to list out all those additional properties that are associated with the normal React component, such as display name. So if I put in child as fc dot display name, I also get that autocomplete. I don't get any error anymore, and if I mouse over that, I'm told that this might be a string, but if we never set it, it also might be undefined. So this is another way that we can set up a React component with TypeScript. Which one is best for you really comes down to whether or not you want to access or make use of these additional properties. It is definitely not strictly required that you make use of this style of declaration. Again, it really comes up to you, and throughout this course, we might make use of both different styles. Last thing I want to mention very quickly, you might see inside of some blog posts, documentation, and whatnot, rather than writing out just FC right here, that is actually an abbreviation for function component. So you might see some documentation that says react.function component instead. This is 100% identical, it's just a much longer way of writing this out. So chances are you usually want to make use of just FC unless you want to write out that entire name of function component. Okay, so just a little bit more on props and TypeScript. Quick pause right here and move on in just a moment.